Okay, I think we can slowly start. I'm just welcoming everyone, and I'm still admitting people into the meeting. Okay, so welcome everyone to this webinar. So today Alan Jansson Sensei will be talking about the root treatment, going again into the understanding of the needling techniques, and more specifically today talking about tonification, dispersion, and shunting. So Alan Jansson has practiced TCM and traditional Japanese acupuncture for 37 years and has studied for the last 22 with Masakazu Ikeda Sensei in Japan. He's also been an undergraduate teacher for acupuncture course for 26 years ago, and since then he has been hosting postgraduate students in his clinics, and he also teaches worldwide, giving seminars in Europe, Indonesia, South America, and America. And today we have Naomi Jansson with us again. She's a second-generation acupuncturist, and Alan and Naomi, they run a clinic together in the Gold Coast. And Naomi is also a student of traditional Japanese acupuncture.
Beautiful vibration. Reminds me so much of acupuncture, the practice of acupuncture. It's the understanding that we're working with vibrational medicine. It's really the underpinning awareness that can turbocharge our treatments. So today we're going to be talking about the techniques, the needling techniques for the root treatment. There are basically, there are three, but there are many variations on how we use those three techniques. We can vary in the direction of needling. We can vary in the depth of needling, and we definitely vary in the depth of needling according to the type of point we're using. For instance, if we're needling the water point, as I mentioned last week, then we needle a little bit deeper than if we're needling the wood point.
Hello. So I'm going to get straight to it and ask the question directly, which we have been waiting for this explanation. So what are the needle techniques used in the root treatment, Alan Sensei?
Right, yeah, it's a very good question. Basically, there are three fundamental needling techniques. The first is the tonification technique. This is where we're injecting is the wrong word. This is where we're conveying or we're communicating the yang qi or the warmth, human warmth. We're communicating that, as I discussed last week, through ourselves down through the lung and the large intestine meridian, through the shaft of the needle and to the point, and then to the meridian, and from the meridian vibrating out through the patient's body. It sounds incredibly esoteric, but and then there's no doubt there are times where I just, how? Why? I can assure you though, certainly in the last 24 years as I've developed my skills in needling, that we are able to adjust the movement of qi and blood this way in a very patient-friendly manner. So this tonification is the first one where we're moving warmth or yang qi to the patient, conveying it, if you like. The second technique, the basic technique that's outlined in the Ling Shu in chapter 1, is the dispersive technique. Essentially speaking, that's where we're looking to release a build-up of excessive yang qi from a particular meridian in the body. We'll discuss a little more in depth a bit later in the webinar regarding when the appropriate times and how we might be doing that and why we might do it. And the third technique, which is the third technique is the shunting technique. the character for shunting is slightly different from the character for dispersion. And essentially speaking, shunting is the transferring or the moving of energy from one place to another. Ironically, Edward Obeidi Sensei is the one that came up with the English term shunting. And it confuses a lot of people. Perhaps I should explain as to how he came up with that particular technique. His son, Alex, was a young boy, and Edward commonly read him English kindergarten book called Thomas the Tank Engine, which was modelled on a humanistic train. And Thomas would often go to a side track and allow another train to pass and then come back on. And he felt, and because his understanding of the character for shunting was that transferal, the ability to move from the main line to another line and come back on to send the train back, or it's where we're strategically altering the flow of qi and blood in a particular meridian. We could be transferring it to a deeper level, and there are times where we can actually transfer it to another meridian, especially when we're talking about shunting the yang meridians, which is primarily what we'll do. It's rarely we'll shunt a yin meridian, but it does happen. But the yang meridians will be looking primarily at calming the heat, the excessive amount of yang energy that might occur. So a situation where that might happen would be if we have someone that's is what we call yin deficient. That means that the jin ye, or the cooling, contracting function is diminished. So the control of the yang energy is belittled, and the yang energy can then travel basically wherever it wants to go, and it's not always in a positive way. I explain it normally as like a class of school children with a teacher at the front. So the teacher is the yin and the kids are the yang. So whilst the teacher's there directing the kids, then it tends to be a constructive process for the lesson. If the teacher were to walk out of the classroom, then in my experience, certainly when I was a young boy, mayhem erupted. There was no direction and it was a chaos. And this is essentially what will happen when we become what I know as a term as yin deficient, or the jin ye becomes deficient. A practical example might be stiff neck or shoulders, where the jin ye, or the yin qi of the kidney and the liver is deficient. So the excessive yang qi will travel up both the bladder and the gallbladder meridian, affecting the neck and the shoulders and the occipital area. That can also cause migraine headaches and various other issues. So there's three basic techniques. Within those techniques, there are many, many variations. As I said, the direction we needle, the depth we needle, the type of stimulation we might utilize, excuse me, in the needle, and also the selection of and the quality of points that we're using as well.
Thank you. So to further clarify, you're adjusting your technique of needling in the root treatment according to your diagnosis and activating the meridian using your, and the point using your like classical needling techniques?
Yes. So certainly from my perspective and in my experience, the most effective way of assessing how the treatment's going. And firstly, to explain that in the root treatment, the response is spontaneous. It's right then, right now, it's in that moment. So we can assess the response. There are a number of different ways we can feel the patient relax. They might exhale, or they might sigh, or you can hear some borborygms or gurgling in the stomach. But the primary way, again, this takes practice. All of this takes practice. None of it comes on a plate ready to eat. You need to cook before you eat. You need to practice. But taking the pulse is the singular, most important method of assessing the efficacy or how we're going in the root treatment. I had no understanding of this up until I'd met Ikeda Sensei, excuse me, in this case, January 1996, when Ikeda Sensei had me taking the pulse whilst he was doing the root treatment. Up until that time, and I'd been in practice at that stage for 13 years, I had no idea that acupuncture actually worked spontaneously. I was convinced very, very quickly, because I could feel, even with my rudimentary understanding of the pulse, and I basically hadn't used the pulse up to then because we weren't taught how to use the pulse at college. I realized that it was a treasure chest of information, and it was very challenging initially. And anyone that's viewing, need to be very patient, but you need to be persistent and consistent in taking pulse continually. In clinic, take your own pulse, take your mother's pulse, your daughter's pulse, your partner's pulse, your children's pulse, take the pulse of the cat, the dog, even the budgerigar. Well, maybe not. Budgerigar's hard. Pulse on the paws, not so good. But the more we take the pulse, then the more clicks we get in the fingertips, the more understanding, the more sensitivity we develop. So we can assess, there's a change in the pulse now. So we can actually administer the root treatment, taking the pulse. That's what it was like. There we go. I can feel the gallbladder now. Or, the gallbladder's pulse has come down. The liver pulse has filled up. The heart pulse has calmed down. The heart pulse hasn't calmed down. Lung pulse, etc. Throughout the various positions, we can start to feel the quality of the pulse overall in individual positions, and the quantity of the pulse, most importantly, to understand the balancing of the energetic meridian network in that particular patient.
Thank you for clarifying that further. And as far as from the classics, do we have any direction from the classics about how to utilize these techniques?
You would like a demonstration, would you?
Sure.
Well, okay, well, let's just have a look at a little insert there. If there is a deficiency, we tonify. So tonify means to give, to provide energy, to provide yang qi, yeah? If there is an excess, we disperse, yeah? So for deficiency, when we want to tonify, we're looking to needle in the direction of the meridian. And there are exceptions, but primarily we're looking to tonify the yin or the zhang meridian. There are times and occasions where we tonify the yang meridians, but far less regularly than we would tonify the yin meridians. So for the leg meridians, we're needling up the leg towards the trunk of the body, and for the yin meridians on the arm, we're looking to needle in the direction of the extremity, from the trunk out towards the extremity. So that's a kind of a fundamental strategy. That's one of the strategies. We insert the needle slowly, and then we remove the needle quickly. This is in the classics. This is written in the Ling Shu. This is not just Japanese acupuncture. This is classical acupuncture. It is traditional East Asian medicine. After removing the needle, we close the needle hole. So that's tonification. I know that in many of the colleges, there's very little respect paid to the classics and to what's said in the classics in regarding the needling. I can only speak from my experience, and I have a deep understanding and belief in these small things that we do well, then they all add up to increasing the potency of our treatments. If there is excess and we're looking to disperse, rarely we will disperse yin meridian. It does happen, but primarily we're looking to disperse, we'll disperse the yang meridians. We for instance, if a person has a fever, a high fever, and there's an enormous amount of heat in the yang ming or the xiao-yang meridians, this is where we can actually disperse. So there are occasions when there's so much heat in those meridians that we disperse them first, and then we'll tonify the yin meridians. But primarily, we'll tonify the yin meridian, and then if there's still excess, then we can disperse the associated yang meridian where the excess is. And that can be done, again, through needling technique. For instance, if we had an enormous amount of heat in the stomach meridian, then we might use stomach 36, we might use stomach 44, 2 key points, stomach 43, depending on the symptomology and where it's occurring. In that case, we insert the needle quickly, as distinct from when we tonify, where we insert the needle slowly. I'll demonstrate these techniques in just a moment. Then we remove the needle slowly, this is in dispersion, and then we leave the hole open. This has a tremendously effective, is very effective in the outcome, in delivering the appropriate outcome during the treatment. The other technique that we'll discuss today is the shunting technique. So what we're looking to do with shunting is we're looking to transfer the energy. So in this case, as I said, the character for shunting is slightly different. Unless you are aware of the kanji and the way the language, the characters are written, you probably miss. But there's an extra little tail in there. And that disappeared at some time during history. But if we look at the more original classical texts, we'll see that the character is slightly different to the one that's commonly used to represent dispersion now. This character is shunting. This is the transferring of energy from one level of a meridian to another. So the idea behind classical medicine is we waste as little as possible. We waste nothing unless we have to disperse because there's so much excess yang qi. But if there's an excess, but it's not dramatic as in the fever or really volatile yang energy, we can shunt, which the shunting technique's about moving the yang energy to a deeper level in the yang meridian. So let's use the stomach meridian again, or the yang ming, leg yang ming meridian again. In this case, we're looking at moving the yang energy, which is sitting on the surface, and taking that down to a yin level. We can also bring the yin energy up to a yang level. So as this is all within millimeters of depth. This is not, we're not talking suns or we're talking tiny little gradients, and we're talking focus, intention, and we're talking total awareness of what's going on, where the needle is and at the needle point. So we can draw the yin energy up in the yang meridian as we might from the well, or we can take the heat down from the hot surface down and warm up the yin energy, depending on what it is we're trying to achieve.
Very, very important part of needling is the oshiri. So the oshiri is very, very important. This is the conduction. This is during the tonifying process. This is actually the conduction of yang qi. This revolves around the human-to-human connection. And I'm absolutely convinced now, after 37 years in practice, that the magic of this medicine, the true potency of this medicine, comes from human-to-human contact. that there is efficacy with electroacupuncture. There is efficacy with just sticking needles in and twisting them around and walking away. But from my experience, the acupuncture realizes its true potency from human to human contact. So I have 3, what we call shinkans. We call these guide tubes. This instrument was developed by a Japanese practitioner, a blind Japanese practitioner, to help his needling to become painless, because with the tonification, with basically with all styles, dispersion is a little bit of discomfort. With tonification, there should be no discomfort whatsoever. So I have 3 types of shinkan here. This one is gold-plated shinkan. The actual gold metal shinkan is probably the most effective and potent at all, because of the malleability and the conductive nature of gold is the highest of the 3 metals that are readily used in building these, what we call guide tubes. So we can actually use the guide tubes or shinkans as an instrument unto their own. So the more warmth that's conducted through the guide tube, it adds to the potency of treatment. Where incremental improvements can result in massive difference in the outcome of the treatment. This one is your standard guide tube. This one is a stainless steel guide tube, readily available for X number of dollars. Easily purchasable from your local Japanese acupuncture equipment supplier. And the last one I'm showing you now, and this is my absolute favorite. This is a silver shinkan that Ikeda Sensei gave to us several years ago. It just feels very different in the hand. It is second to a gold shinkan in conductivity and superior to the stainless steel shinkan. In clinic on a daily basis, I commonly use the stainless steel shinkan. The silver shinkan's for special occasions. This is for hygienic purposes. So we actually autoclave the shinkans. Many of the needles come, we have needles come here when we buy in a plastic tube. That is a plastic shinkan that we can use. The edge on the bottom of the shinkan is very soft and rounded. That makes it a lot more conducive to painless needling than if the edge of the plastic edge is sharp. So let's get down to the demonstration. I've extracted the needle from. Now I actually load the needle into the shinkan. I have my oshiri. I've located the point. I'm moving the waiki away, and I am needling in slowly. You see it, tap, tap, tap. But if you, I'll just remember that, you see I'm actually where I'm using, what part of my finger I'm using, and not up here at the tip, because at the tip, the lever is a lot longer. So to control the lever, it's a lot more difficult. If we shorten the lever, in other words, if I'm just halfway, if I've got great big fingers, I can just tap, 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 tap. And that, along with moving the waiki aside and creating a strong oshiri here, we're able to commonly, most frequently, get the needle in to the point and the meridian in a painless fashion, which, as I've just said before, is the most important factor in the tonification. The Yankee moving through here, we take the shinkan away, and then we have a grip to the needle. This is the potency. This is an extremely important part of classical acupuncture. Not jamming the needle around, which is one way, just conducting the energy through the fingers. We focus on where the tip of the needle is. And if you like, you can actually imagine the pathway of the meridian as you're holding the needle. It depends on your dexterity, your skill, and your understanding, and generally where you're at and where the patient's at as to how long we would leave the needle in. Commonly, there are ways of doing it according to the number of breaths, but in this situation, or in my situation now, I'll tend to needle according to the type of point. Obviously, the wood points require a lot shorter time to cause an influence than the water points, which again, because of their nature and the deeper needling and the type of energy we find at the water points, it's going to take a little longer to get a similar reaction. When we withdraw the needle, we've gone in slowly, we come out quickly, seal the point with the index finger. And then that's done. We then assess the patient by checking the pulse. Or we can actually, whilst we're holding the Ashidi, if it works with our dexterity, we can actually take the pulse, a bit like tuning a guitar or a piano. We're listening with our fingers to any change that might occur in the pulse. Next technique I'll demonstrate is dispersion. We can use a 3-edged needle or a bleeding needle to disperse. We can bleed the ting points. We can bleed where there's local stagnation. These are common ways to disperse. Certainly extremely effective, especially when there's high fever in the Yang Ming meridian. Bleeding the stomach meridian can be an invaluable way of reducing the heat and the fever. However, looking at the needling techniques, again, we create the move the Wei Qi aside, yeah? And then we're parting the Wei Qi, then we come in again with the needle and the Shinkan. We're got similar situation to we had with the tonification, but instead of going in slowly, in this case, we go in more quickly and we've gone in a little deeper. Then we're sitting there, and when we bring the needle out, it's like we're drawing up a bucket of water from the bottom of the well. We take the needle out and then we open the point. So that is dispersion. So firstly, we've done tonification and dispersion. The next technique is the shunting or the transferring or the balancing or the regulating. Regulating is a good word to use for shunting. I think it's a nice way of explaining it. So with shunting, again, we're looking at finding the point. By the way, this towel was given to me by Ikeda Sensei. I believe it was almost 20 years ago. So we just find the point, we move the Wei Qi aside, the Yang Qi aside. I open the point up. Some people clamp it. I open the point up. I go in with the needle. I'm tapping in quite quickly again. And I'm down again. I've got the bucket in the well. I'm searching, I'm feeling, I'm totally present at the point of the needle, at the tip of the needle. I hook the energy, hook the chi, I bring it up, then I'm hesitating just below the surface. So I've gone in, draw the bucket up, hold, suspend, empty the bucket out, take the needle out, and seal. So the major difference between dispersion and shunting is closing the hole and that hesitation just before we come out. So they're the three fundamental needling techniques. Maria,
how or whether the root treatment is working. The primary way of doing this is through the pulse. But also, and especially when we're talking of acute conditions or extreme conditions, it's often the response will be spontaneous. So there will be an improvement in the symptoms of the patient. For instance, a patient might have a terrible headache. We would not be surprised if we're treating in the most potent way to get some instant improvement in the nature of the headache of that particular patient. There are instances, and I just talked about last week, where I've just had the opportunity to utilize root treatments in the treating of people, just like a 2-minute treatment, a 3-minute treatment, where the change in the symptomology, the improvement in the patient's condition has been very marked just from the root treatment. But often we'll need to use some local treatment as well, and we'll go into that a bit later down the track. But Ikeda Sensei commonly often said to us that the efficacy, the root treatment is 90% of the outcome of the treatment. So if we get the root treatment right, the chances are the patient's condition will improve markedly just from the treatment. We're not always going to get it right. Again, as I said last week, we've got to allow ourselves slack. We are always learning. I certainly am. If we make a mistake, the most important thing is to recognize that we have made a mistake and revise and look at what we can do to rectify the situation. I have caused people like instant migraine headaches by administering the incorrect root treatment, or conversely, I've caused people who have been really exhausted to be even more exhausted. So one of the keys, understanding the patient really should walk out of the treatment feeling relaxed and energized in a directed way. So the yin and the yang are balanced. I mean, this is the ideal. When the patient, if the patient's feeling better during the treatment, and as we're finishing the treatment off, then we're able to not persuade, but introduce them to the concept of coming again next week to finish the treatment off. And it's not conning the patient, it's actually getting them to a state where we can say, see you later, you don't come back, don't need to come back for a month or 2 months' time. Underneath all of this treatment of symptoms is our unique ability as practitioners of classical acupuncture is to read a patient's constitution and help them to maintain their health, not just curing pain and symptoms. That's good. Primarily, people are taught how to treat conditions and symptoms and not how to treat the patient who has the conditions and symptoms. If we develop and understand this ability to understand and read the constitutions, we can promote people's health. And that is going to be an invaluable asset. This medicine, from my clinical experience, is the bomb for maintaining and promoting better health in the patient, as well as the pain and all the other symptomology. I've been running around the world for the last 20 odd years, telling people, hey, there's more to this than we know, you know, like this stuff is really good. It doesn't walk in the door. You've got to open the door and invite it in, and then you have to work. You have to study and practice. And if you're not prepared to study and practice, then your clinical outcomes will always be limited to your awareness and your knowledge and your skill. They're stainless steel. The metal is a conductor. The plastic is an insulator. And this is the difference. And the more malleable the metal, then the more conductive. So the gold Shinkan is the most conductive. And then the silver, and then the stainless steel. And then, so from that, I mean, from a point of affordability, then stainless steel is probably the number one choice.
I have here a question from Lucas. So it says here, in order to tonify the lung meridian, we choose the earth point on the lung meridian, lung 9, and the earth point on a earth meridian, we would choose spleen 3.
Correct.
But we could also choose another mother, like the earth point of stomach meridian. And in the case of fire, why don't we tonify heart, but pericardium? We have 4 moms here. Do you want me to read again?
No, just take it one at a time.
I will actually put the question in.
The yang and the yin meridians are a different kettle of fish. The Ling Shu is primarily written in respect of the yin meridians, not so much the yang meridians. I'm not sure about the earth point on the stomach meridian. I'm unsure in what context.
I will repeat again. Could we choose another mother, like the earth point of stomach meridian? And in the case of fire, why don't we tonify heart, but pericardium? Maybe Lucas can talk and you can discuss. I'm not sure.
No, the pericardium meridian this is the conveyor. This is the pericardium meridian conveys the yang qi to the Ming men. And that's why we use the pericardium meridian over and above the heart. Plus the fact that the heart is considered in classical medicine as the emperor. So we leave the emperor alone. We don't want to bother the emperor unless the emperor's in trouble. We leave the emperor alone. We utilize the prince, we utilize the general, but we don't play around with the emperor. And the pericardium meridian is a fire element, as is the heart, and it is the primary connection to tonify the Ming men, or the kidney yang. It's part of the kidney yang, the triple warmer, the pericardium, and the Ming men form that kidney yang entity. So we're working on in that sense, we're using the pericardium meridian to influence, to build kidney yang when we're using the earth point. I beg your pardon, I'm straight a little bit. If we're using the fire point on the pericardium meridian instead of the heart, again, we're looking, the pericardium guards the heart. Inside the pericardial sac is the heart. So we do everything with the pericardium and not so much with the heart. So using the fire point of the pericardium meridian actually has an action of cooling the heart. Remember what I was saying last week? The primary timing that I'm using the fire point for the pericardium meridian is when the patient is suffering from some sort of fever condition, or usually some sort of viral infection where there's an excessive amount of heat present. In that case, I'm using the fire point of the pericardium and the fire point of the spleen. This is the classic formula according to the 69th chapter of the Nanjing. There are many other ways to use the elemental qualities of the points, including the flavor. But let's deal with that a little bit separately, otherwise it becomes too confusing. In regards to the yang meridian, we're primarily looking to either shunt or disperse the yang meridian. There are occasions where we tonify it, but far less common than the dispersion or the shunting of the yang meridian. Being that there is an excessive amount of yang qi, it tends to collect in the yang meridian as a result of the heat moving out and up. So out from the spleen, can go into the stomach, from the liver can go into the gallbladder to the stomach, etc., etc. It can rise up from the liver into the lung. That's a little bit different. That's into the organ itself. So primarily the excessive amount of yang qi, first off, will go to the associated Fu meridian, secondary to the associated Fu organ, and thirdly, it can go to an associated Zhang meridian or organ, and then the last is it will come back and insult the organ of origin. So that can happen in the case of kidney stones.
Because it says each element has two organs, so how do we choose the mother organ to tonify?
The 69th chapter is related to the yin organs, to the Zhang, not to the yang organs, not to the yang meridians, to the yin. The 69th chapter is applied to the yin meridians and the Zhang organs, or the yin organs, not to the yang organs or the yang meridians.
I have here a question from Ling. She's saying, can you use the gold guide tube for dispersion, shunting, and tonifying techniques, or is it more for tonifying?
I can use the gold Shinkan for anything and everything. It is primarily for tonification because of its the malleability and the conductive nature of the metal. But that's immaterial. When we're dispersing or shunting, we're actually using the needle to do the work. It's more when we're tonifying that we're utilizing or maximizing the amount of yang qi that's moving through us to the patient. And because the gold is a more conductive metal and more malleable, then it's a more tonifying and strengthening metal to use, or strengthening tube to use.
Also, Ling, she continues saying, also, can you talk about the depth of needling for all of these? I mean, for the depth of needling for tonification, dispersion, and shunting.
Okay. I'll do my best to do it. This could be a full day, 2 day, 3 day seminar workshop. I'll try and condense it into a couple of minutes. Hey, Faye, I hope you're well over there, darling. Okay, so if we're looking, it depends on the points we're using. We use wood point, 5 point, earth point, metal point, water point. It depends on the points we're using. We use the yarn source points. So the water points we're needling to maybe 2 mil, sometimes 3, but primarily to about 2 mil. Again, as you see in the crease of the elbows, the cuisse or lung 5, the pericardium 3, yeah, they're much deeper than pericardium 7 or lung 9, or for that matter, lung 10 or lung 11. So the closer to the extremity, the less depth is required to elicit a really strong reaction. So if we bleed the ting point, obviously that's a really strong method of dispersing the meridian. But we can actually just prick the ting point and cause a little bit of discomfort. That is a dispersive nature. And when we are looking to tonify the wood points, it's absolutely imperative to do so without causing pain. And that takes some practice. So the wood points, the most superficial, we do insert the needle, but it's not contact in the sense that we're not just resting the needle on the surface, but it's just a little more than contact. This is in the tonification of the wood point. The 5 point, similar scenario, wherever we go with the 5 points, boom, I mean, there's lots of nerve endings and they're closer to the extremities, and therefore the spontaneous response is far greater than the closer we move, and especially to the points on the trunk of the body. So we might needle the 5 points, 0.5 mil. And then we go to the earth points, and perhaps we'll needle the earth points. This is just pulling it out of the air. I mean, it differs according to the build of the person, to the constitution, what we want to do. But we might say, maybe we needle like 1 mil, a little more than 1 mil to the earth points. Then when we look at the metal points, well, we say lung 8, again, this is quite superficial, spleen 5, liver 4. These points, again, there's a lot of bony substance underneath the points, and we have to find the little grooves in there. Again, we might needle 1.5 mil, maybe 2 mil, maybe. And then we look at the earth points, like I say, spleen 3, kidney 3. If we want to tonify the yin and the yang together, then primarily we would use the earth points or the low connecting points. But let's just look at the earth points now. We would needle a little deeper if we wanted to promote the yin and the yang, because the nature of the earth points is very yang anyway, because we're calling on the spleen energy in conjunction with whatever meridian we happen to be needling. So there are situations where we want to tonify both the yin and the yang together. In that case, we would needle a little deeper into the earth points, maybe 2 mil. So we sink down and we're promoting the yin, and by virtue of the fact we're using the earth points, we're also automatically we're tonifying the yang as well. And then last but not least, as far as the 69th chapter goes, the water points, we could needle to 2 or 3 millimeter depth. They're the kind of depths we're talking about. And for someone that's been practicing TCM all their life, it's a real challenge to think, oh my God, how can that possibly work? In fact, the strength of the disbelief is awesome. I have walked that journey. All I can say is, after putting my toe in the water some 26 years ago, it's a well worth journey to walk. And certainly the clinical outcomes from my treatments have grown exponentially as a result of the improvement in my skill and understanding the depth of needling. We'll go more into that at some other stage, but that's a basic blueprint. Hope that's okay, Faye.
Thank you, Alan. I think we have just one more question, and I think it's a good question. I think it would be nice if you could answer. It's from Kaylin. Can you say a little bit about the sensation you feel at the needle before you withdraw it? I understand that is dependent on sensitivity of practitioner fingers.
That's a really good question. What we would normally be looking for when we're working with the yin meridians is a warming. It's just a sense of warmth. It's very difficult for me to explain exactly how I assess that. I mean, it's a whole series of factors. It's just an awareness of the patient as well as the needle. So we're feeling, we can get a warmth at the fingertips. There's a, but there is a sense about the patient. And again, it takes a little time. It's not something that we instantly can get. Some people are really gifted and may get it. I'm not, and I had to work bloody hard to start to develop my sensitivity, because I was very much a yin deficient, yang excess Aussie boy. So sensitivity wasn't one of my key points, but I've worked on it. So yes, we just looked for the warmth, but the other factors, like it's not just at the needle tip. It could be a pulsing in the meridian. It could be a little pulse at the needle point. It could be actually just hearing the patient, just feeling the patient. Sometimes the patient will say, whoa, wow, that feels so much better, like spontaneously, you know, especially with headaches. No, maybe you don't know, but with headaches or with a feeling of tension or stress, they'll immediately feel a drop in the level of tension in their body. So we're also looking at amelioration or a sense of relaxation in the patient, because we're all about encouraging relaxation. This is why during the treatment we try and keep the noise levels even and harmonious. Why we cover the patient so that they stay warm. So we seal the patient in a cocoon of warmth and nourishment so that their body doesn't have to work hard to stay warm. And it's the same with the root treatment. We're providing warmth and nourishment through the point of the needle. And that should, like if we have a drink that we enjoy, or we have a mouthful of food we enjoy, or we see a friend that we like to see, or the sun's shining and we're really looking for that. This induces that sense of, that's what we should be feeling at the fingertip, and the sense we should be getting from the patient during the root treatment when we're trying to assess the efficacy, in conjunction, of course, with the pulse. Thank you for your attention. I'm a very happy camper and I love this beautiful medicine. We have got something very, very special that we can really help many people over the next few years. So much. So thanks again for coming to Maria and Naomi. I couldn't do it without either of you, especially Maria. She was the one that made me do it. So thank you. Everyone stay well. If we can be of any service or support, it's Alan at World Acupuncture.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Naomi. It was really great today. I'm just sharing here the resources we have on our website, World Acupuncture. Just most of you must know, but if you don't know, if you go to the website, you can you have the books translated from Matsukasu Ikeda Sensei. So some of them are already translated into English, so you can have access in the shop in the website. We also have a 3-day video seminar with Ikeda Sensei, which has CPD points if anyone needs that support. The website also, it's an online learning platform. It has more than 200 videos, educational videos with Alan Sensei. It goes through diagnosis, syndrome patterns, skills. So there's a lot of information there. You can go there and you can also just check the free videos so you can have an idea what is inside the website. And you can also have tutoring directly with Alan. And if you have any question, you can contact Alan directly through Alan@World Acupuncture. We're very happy to have you here, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, we are not a disease state. We are all human beings. Love you all. Ciao.